It's the Kink Consultant Podcast, where we're turning up the heat on all things kink and dating, relationships, and pop culture. So close the door, plug in your headphones, and let's get down to it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of The Kink Consultant. I am super excited to bring on this week's guest. Welcome, Pup Locrian. Hey, Pup.
Hi, so good to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Are you kidding? Thank you for coming on. I was really excited about this week's episode.
Yes, I'm
So,
excited too.
can I call you Pup, or would you prefer me to call you Locrian?
Either is fine. Most of the time, people just say pup or Locrian, so I respond to either.
That's really funny because as I was talking to my friends about you, I kept referring to you as Pup Locrian, because I have a lot of friends who are kink curious, but they really don't know the world that well. So they love to ask me a ton of questions. But the truth is, until very recently, honestly, until I became the kink consultant, I knew absolutely nothing about pup play in terms of compared to what I know now, right? And I thought this would be the perfect episode to do because I feel still so new. I can ask questions that I had even a year ago, but I also got a ton of questions from friends who had even more specific things that they wanted to know. I was like, this is great. So, do you mind if I get right into it?
Let's go. I'm
Okay,
ready.
I love it. What is pup play?
That's a great question. I actually do teach a class on puppy play, and that's like the question everyone asks, like, what is this thing? And the first thing I would say is it is both a role play and kind of a lifestyle. For me, being a puppy is part of my identity. So like if you go on my FetLife and you look at my roles, one of them is puppy. But when we're talking about the play specifically, that is generally we would call it a form of role play in which one or more people take on the role of a puppy, or there can also be a handler, a puppy handler. That's generally, when we talk about pup play, that's generally what we mean when we talk about the play itself.
Okay, that makes sense. And now, in the world of DS and top and bottoms and power exchange, would you be able to say that the puppies are bottoms or subs and the handlers are tops or doms? Like, how would you define that? Does that exist there?
Not as much as you would think. So there is kind of similar to Little's this conception that, oh, puppies are the bottoms, but that's not always the case. You can have relationships and dynamics between puppies wherein one puppy is in charge and they take on the dominant role and the other puppy is submissive. You can also have puppy handler relationships where the puppy is in charge and the handler is submissive. As for being a top or a bottom, I guess you could technically call puppies bottom in that they're the ones receiving the pup play, but that's only in the context of pup play. I, as a puppy, have been known to single tail people, and I'm very much topping that. So I consider being a puppy more of an identity outside of DS, outside of play. It is more of a lifestyle identity, a specific subgroup that you identify with. It doesn't necessarily have to do with your role or your position in a relationship.
That was such a well done answer that I now want to take your class because I'm like, I feel that's just the tip of the iceberg.
There's a lot, but yeah.
Yeah. Being part of the Spango community, I also consider myself in a subgroup of like that falls under the umbrella of kink and BDSM, but it's not as general as a lot of the other stuff that's also hard to define. Another question that kept coming up and has come up, I think, probably for years for you as well. What's the difference between pup play and being a furry?
Ooh, this is the question that comes up a lot. So I consider puppies to be inherently kinky. When you look at the history of puppy play, this started in the gay leather scene. And at that time, puppies were submissive. It was like, you were someone's dog slave. You were like very devoted. And it was very much about the objectification, humiliation, a very almost MS kind of style of dynamic. So puppy play from its inception has been associated with and integrated into the kink lifestyle. That's different than furries, where it originated more as people expressing an anthropomorphized character, right? They're not inherently kinky, although I will say I know a lot of kinky furries, but this is something that is more enjoyed by, I would say, the nerd community, but generally like role play community, and something that would fall outside of kink. And you can see that in furry conventions are open to the public. There are, of course, 18 plus sections, and the after parties have been known to get a little wild, but it is okay, socially okay, to bring someone under the age of 18 to a furry convention. That would not be the case for a pup convention. If I saw someone under the age of 18 at a pup convention, I would be very, very concerned because, again, puppies are how they were formed, and what we are today as a community is just inherently of an adult nature. Whereas furries, it's much wider, it's much more open.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even consider furries kink adjacent because it seems
Yeah.
like its own thing, really.
Yeah.
You mentioned conventions. So, are there many that go on? Do you attend them? Like, there's a lot of listeners out there who are interested in this and don't know that there are conventions happening. So, I would love if you would share even your first experience with one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll talk about conventions in two different ways. The first I'll start with, there are kink conventions and leather
Yes.
conventions. And at those, it is not uncommon to see puppies there. Obviously, I go to different conventions, I teach at conventions, and when I'm in a convention space, oftentimes I will have puppy gear. Usually for me, that looks like, I'll be wearing clothing, but then I'll have a tail on my belt, and then I'll have my hood either on or hanging if I'm talking to someone or teaching. So just in general, yes, you can go to kink conventions and you will see either classes about puppy play, or you'll see puppies, or you'll see activities. One of my favorite conventions, DomCon LA, they have at the beginning on that Friday, they have a little pet parade, and it's not uncommon to see puppies there. On the other hand, there are conventions that are specifically for puppies. These often revolve around contests. Generally, they're puppy and trainer contests. The largest one is International Puppy Trainer, which I believe is held in Chicago. I'll get an angry
Ooh.
email if it wasn't. Um, but that is where puppies and handlers go to compete for titles. So, for example, in Los Angeles, they have LA Puppy. I believe in Colorado, there's a puppy trainer contest as well. There are also puppy trainer contests across the rest of the US and even internationally. So those are usually a weekend, and it looks much more like a leather contest in which puppies and handlers will have an interview. There's probably a pop question. There's probably going to be some sort of show portion where you're wearing your gear or you're wearing a leather outfit or whatever have you. But those contestants will compete all through the weekend, and at the end, you get announced as either LA Puppy or LA Trainer, or if you're going for the international one, International Puppy, International Trainer. Some are regional. You could be like Rocky Mountain Puppy, which is like the Colorado area. I don't know if that's the title, but just as an example. But then you basically represent your community as the puppy or the trainer of that year, and you go to events and you make appearances and you judge other competitions and you do education, all sorts of different things.
So you've just blown my mind because what's actually happening is what you just described to me sounded a lot like a Miss Universe pageant. Okay. And then there are more regional ones. Is it ever a thing that's a tiered system where the regional ones work up to a big
Yep.
USA thing? Oh,
That's
gosh.
how it works. And that's honestly how pretty much all leather competitions work. So I have a friend, shout out my friend Buck Harder, who just won Mr. Palm Springs Leather.
Ooh.
And he is now going to go compete at the next level, which is International Mr. Leather. And International Mr. Leather is a big deal. Usually you get about 50 contestants, 50 to 60 from all over the United States and from the world because it is an international
Yes.
competition. But yeah, that's generally how leather competitions work, and puppy competitions are no different. You will usually go to a bar contest. And so, like, for example, the one closest to me in Sacramento is Mr. Bolt. You can compete for Mr. Bolt Leather. Then sometimes in order to go to International Mr. Leather, you have to go to a regional contest after that. And the closest regional contest, also in Sacramento, is Northwest Person of Leather. They are different circuits. Northwest Person of Leather goes to International Person of Leather, whereas Mr. Bolt goes to IML, International Mr. Leather. But there are sometimes regional contests that you can only enter after you've won a bar contest. And then from those regional contests, you go to International Mr. Leather, which is the international title.
There are puppy celebrities then. Well, celebrity might be the wrong word, but they're really well known for having won multiple awards.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I think for myself personally, what makes a puppy well known and what really catches my attention with a puppy isn't so much the awards they win, it's what they do with them. I'm
Mhm.
friends with some puppies who have won a regional title, and they work hard to be a presence in their community, whether it be showing up to events as a volunteer or a DM, which is a dungeon monitor, giving education writing, speaking. I know some puppies who like do what I do, but with like mainstream media, which is something I wouldn't do. But to me, well-known puppies, absolutely, like some of them are title holders, but a lot of them do a lot of community service, which I think is super important for anyone in the community, but especially for someone who has a title. I'm really looking at how are they giving back to the community that put them where they
Mm,
are.
yeah, 100%. Weird question, but one of the things that you kind of brushed over this, how much of this is looks based? Is there a fitness aspect to this?
Yes and no. It depends on the title. Truly, it depends on the title. Some titles, there's always a look portion. There's almost always a look portion where they're not judging fitness there. They're not looking for like, oh, you have great abs and great pecs. What they're looking at is someone's outfit. So at IML, for example, there is a bar wear, and that's what you would wear to a leather bar. There's also a jockstrap portion, you in a jockstrap. And then I believe there's also a formal leather portion. Generally, you see the guys in formal leather anyway. They look amazing, but there is, I believe, as a part of the contest, looking like coming out in a formal look. I believe that's also the time where you deliver your speech. Again, I might be getting some of this wrong. It's been a while since I've actually looked at the competition and exactly what sections are where, but there's at least one looks portion in most contests. I'm guessing for puppy contests, that's usually puppy gear, something like that. So it's not always about fitness. I won't speak to how they're judged because I can't tell you what's going through the judges' minds, but it's generally supposed to be about like what you're wearing, your confidence, how you're showing it off, things like that.
Makes a ton of sense. Okay, taking a slight step back, a question I ask a lot of kink involved guests on my show is when did you realize you were kinky?
It's been something I've known for a very long time. When I was much younger, I liked to read. When I discovered the internet, naturally I gravitated towards reading sites, found romance books, found some dark romance books, and kind of hopped in there. I have been an active participant in organized kink community since I was 18. So as of from the time of recording, 2 days from now, I'll be turning 25. So that's 7 years. So that's how long I've been actively participating. But as far as just like me knowing that I was into some of the things I've been into, it's been, I couldn't tell you exactly the moment. It's been a
Oh,
long
fair.
time.
I say I was born this way because, like, I remember being 5 and thinking about very kinky things and just not understanding until I was older. Oh, this is kink. And this is, for me, something sexual, but not for everyone. When did you first identify as a pup?
As a puppy, a little, I think it's been 4 years now. So shortly after I got into the community, I identified as a D type. And as a part of that, I met puppies and I was a puppy handler. And I always thought, oh, this looks really fun. This is like, kind of it is kind of a thing. But it was actually being in college that kind of convinced me to be a puppy. I was looking at the puppies I was playing with and I was like, oh, this is really fun. They look so happy and carefree. And I'm like, gosh, I could use that. I'm taking 20 credits. I'm a music student. I'm practicing until 1 in the morning. I don't have a sleep schedule, social life, forget it. Just a lot. And so I tried it out and I ended up really, really liking it. And I think I got fully into puppy play, like doing it all the time about a little over 3 years ago. But since then, it's been one of my main identities. And then I fully changed my name to Pup Locrian a little over a year ago.
Can I ask what it was before that?
Yeah, it was Phrygian monks.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I feel I knew that on some level. Even though I wasn't following you, I don't think a little more than a year ago.
You might have
Yeah.
seen it
Maybe
somewhere.
written somewhere. Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
in the way the socials allow you to see like previous videos. This is a question that I'm never really sure how to phrase because I understand it's complex, even for me. And when people ask me about kink, how much of identifying as a puppy is intertwined with your own sexuality and sex life?
Great question. As far as my sexuality, that's not necessarily, it doesn't affect who I'm attracted to or things like that. I guess in the tiniest way of at this moment, I'm much more of an S type right now. So I am looking for more dominant people. But again, as we established before, that doesn't necessarily mean puppy, anything like that. So as far as sexuality, that's not necessarily affected. But as far as my sex life, since most of the play I do is puppy play, most of the sex that I have, because when I play, it's rarely sexual for me, but if it is in the context of that play, it's going to be as a puppy usually. So there is that.
Yeah, I can relate. Completely. Not as a puppy, but as someone who's into spanking. You answered that so well. I'm feeling like I need to take your answer and then just switch out some words and be like, that's how I'm going to answer it going forward. Okay. We also talked a little bit about gear, right? And I
Mhm.
mean, what gear do you have? You mentioned a tail and your hood that you might wear on your belt or wear on, but is seems pretty painful to be on all fours playing as a puppy. What protective gear do you wear? Like I want to know all of it.
Great question. So yeah, we can break gear up into a couple of different categories. You can have the more cosmetic gear, and then you have the protective stuff. So as far as the protective stuff, knee pads and wrist wraps. That's for me an absolute must. I also like to wear socks. I just don't like my bare feet on like stuff, but
Fair.
knee pads absolutely essential for me unless you're playing, even if you're playing on a padded foam surface. If you've ever been on like a wrestling mat or a gym floor, you'll know that if you slide your knee, you can get mat burn, and that is painful. And carpets, while they can be soft, they're not necessarily absorbent, so you're still on like some pretty rough terrain. So I always say knee pads. I use a kind of like a sleeve, kind of like a dancer's sleeve or a wrestling sleeve that is a little bit thinner, but it does stay on really well. And then the other thing is wrist wraps. When you are on all fours, your wrists aren't necessarily designed to support the human body for long periods of time.
Oh yeah.
So I do wear, they're from Mr. S, but they wrap around your wrists. And for me, number one, they look super cute. They have puppy paws on them. They're purple. They're adorable. But they also give me just a little bit of extra oomph in my wrist so I can be comfortable while playing. They also extend a little bit so that my knuckles aren't on like the hard floor for all that time. So they're padded.
Ooh, okay. That brings up a new question. When you say knuckles on your floor, when I imagine puppy play, I'm like on all fours, my hands down. Are you on your knuckles?
I switch it up. This puts a lot of strain because your wrist is bent for those who cannot see. For
Yes.
everyone else, if you are on all fours with your hands flat, since your wrists are bent, it kind of creates an awkward angle and you're putting a lot of pressure right at the bend in your wrist. So I alternate. I go sometime, most of the time, on like a clenched fist, and that padding protects that. And that way your wrist is straight, so you have a little bit more strength there. But sometimes, especially if I'm like laying down, it's going to be, flat hands.
Not enough appreciation is given to the amount of strain we put our body through to enjoy our specific kinks.
It's true. Puppy play is it can be a very physical play. Don't get me wrong, there are some puppy scenes where I am just like relaxing and watching a movie. And I've had entire scenes where my whole job was to just cuddle with someone and be cute. Those are fortunately not very physically taxing,
Yeah.
but I'm also very into puppy training. So that is where they like someone wants me to learn a specific thing, whether it be how to walk properly with them or sit, stay, or other commands. And that can get rather intense. You're moving around, you're using your body, and really, this is physical exercise. Imagine on all fours doing an obstacle course. That's like literally some of what puppy play is, So puppy play can actually be extremely physically taxing. And I will say it is kind of my workout. It is absolutely, if I know I'm doing like a good hour-long session, I'm not going to the gym or working out that day because that is going to be
Oh,
it's going to be
I
the workout.
Yeah, and I would encourage everyone to just take a second and think about how physically taxing it would be if I made you get down on all fours right now and walk around for even half an hour. That
Yeah.
is a lot of work. So
Yeah.
I commend you for it and I agree. Ooh, training. Are there treats involved in training?
Yes, there are. One tip I have about treats is I like to alternate between a salty and a sweet thing. If you have too much sweet, you get thirsty. If you have too much salty, you get thirsty. And depending on what you're wearing, it can be hard to drink water while doing puppy play. And and for me, it's mostly I don't necessarily love breaking the immersion of, okay, I need water, pull the hood up, drink. So
Yeah.
I try to keep myself as hydrated as possible. But yes, treats are involved. Skittles, M&Ms, those are good. I for salty will get one of those, like those meat sticks that you can get at a gas station.
I know them well.
You can just cut them into like 1 inch pieces and they make a great treat. So just some easy things. You don't have to break the bank. I will say I don't recommend using actual dog food. it's made for dogs. And while we are playing as puppies, we are not actually puppies. Most importantly, we do not have the digestive system of one. So for your own safety, because you don't necessarily know exactly what's in there and how it will react to you, stick to human food while doing puppy play.
That is great advice. I remember when I first heard about treats, though, I was so excited. I was like, of course they get and deserve treats if they are doing well. I was like, but what are those treats? Very fun. For the newbies out there who are interested now and curious about puppy play, what advice can you give them?
The first piece of advice I would have is you don't need to rush out and buy all of the gear that you see people wearing online
Mm.
or even in person. I have been collecting my gear over a 3-year period now. And, usually it's like a jockstrap here, a hood there, a harness there. I did not, with the exception of my initial purchase, go buy everything. To give you perspective, a hood, let's say from Mr. S Leather, because that's where I purchased mine, can range between 70 to, if you're getting a full leather hood, I mean, that's like $300 or $400.
Whoa.
A harness can be anywhere from 100 and up. A jockstrap, Mr. S Leather jockstrap, I think they're $60. I'd have to check. But then I also wear like those wrist wraps were $100. The knee pads were another $30. My boots, which I wear to puppy socials and stuff when I'm not like actively playing, those were another $200. So you can see it adds up. Like,
Oh, yeah.
if you have seen my pictures online, you'll be like, wow, that doesn't look like a lot of fabric. You're right. And yet still, it cost me almost $1,000.
I know.
Which,
And you look so good wearing it, though. So it was money
thank
well
you.
spent.
It's money well spent. But the thing I want new people to realize is don't feel the pressure to buy those things right off the bat. Instead, focus on, do you like puppy play? Sometimes we can find the allure of something really hot, but then you actually do it and you're sweaty and the room is uncomfortable and you're like, oh my God, I don't want to do this kind of play right now. Or maybe you figure out, I don't want to do this kind of play at all. To me, being a puppy and being on all fours is weird as hell. So I don't want to do that. And to that I say that is okay. But I don't want someone to make the financial investment of gear before discovering they don't like it, because the return policy on most things is not.
Not.
You
Yeah, I know.
don't
I've
get to.
been there.
So my other tip would be talk to other puppies and ask them about their experiences. You don't have to take a class necessarily. You don't have to go like to an educator, but if you have the ability to be in community with other puppies and ask them just like, hey, what's being a puppy like to you? Do you identify as a certain kind of puppy? Like, what does your play or your persona look like? Different than a fursona, but I'm just like, who are you as a puppy and how did you kind of find that out? That is a great way to kind of crowdsource information about what being a puppy might be like for you. Like for myself, I discovered.
I was gonna say, can we start asking you those questions? Because I'm like, what kind of puppy do you identify as?
Yeah, I was actually about to say, so for myself, I'm very much a mix between a pit bull and a husky. I'm very, as a puppy, emotive and expressive. I love to use my eyes to get what I want. And if you've seen a pit bull, you know how good they are with their eyes. But at the same time, I am very talkative. I make sounds. I don't just bark. I like growl, whine, do that weird pseudo talky thing that huskies do.
Huskies do.
I can do a very good husky sigh, just like the like really explosive kind of breath of air. So that's kind of where I get my mannerisms from.
How do people discover their identity or type of puppy they identify as? Like, is it something that's given to you because people witness you, or do you decide it for yourself?
Just kind of figured it out on my own. For me, I figured out how I liked to act as a puppy. And then I was like, oh, this is really kind of similar to what this particular breed of dog does. Also, I should have said this earlier, but I will say it now. Puppy play has absolutely nothing to do with real animals. That is illegal. So
I would never have even thought to say that. So thank you for saying
unfortunately, I've had to deal with people who are like, so you like animals? I'm like, no, I actually don't. Love animals. They're cute,
but you don't love animals like that, like they're implying.
Precisely. So puppy play has nothing to do with IRL animals. It's very much a play between consenting humans. With that out of the way, for me, it was I have been around dogs all of my life and I've kind of observed how they act. And so as I was kind of beginning to play, I'm like, well, what would the dog do? You know,
Yeah.
what is it? Like, well, I'm going to go chew on this thing. And then I did, you know.
I love that. And so you really just became authentically like, okay, let me see what they do. I'm going to do that. And my assumption is you enjoyed it, right?
Yeah. For me, the biggest thing is I enjoy clearing my mind and not being in a place where I have to think about everything. You know, I've held very high stress jobs. I've been in school. I do a lot of things that require me to hold a lot of hats, responsibilities, roles, etc., etc. And the main draw of puppy play for me was I get to turn my head off for however long I'm playing and just be a pup, you know.
Yeah.
I get to not worry about that 12-page essay that's due and worry about the fact that the person on the other end of this rope is holding it and I don't have it. And that's the biggest problem in my life right now is I am not the sole thing that has control of this rope. So that was a huge draw for me. It was just like the no thoughts, head empty. I get to just kind of pup out for a bit.
The irony being that I guess being on a leash or a rope gave you freedom from
Yes.
life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would encourage for anyone that is in my class, I talk about that. That is very much escapism. That can be healthy in doses. That should not be like, don't rely on escapism as like the only thing that you do all the time. In that, if it's affecting your work or your life, that's a line that you should talk to someone about. But like if you're missing work, be
Oh,
like, I don't feel like working today. I just want a puppy. That's I still get my responsibilities done. In me being no thoughts, head empty, that is after, okay, I'm gonna practice for 2 hours because I have a music degree and that is all that we do. Or I'm gonna make sure that this paper gets done because it needs to get done. So you can very much treat it as a reward. I did 3 hours of good, solid homework today, or I graded 50 papers. I'm going to be a puppy now for an hour,
that's a good
or
point. The escapism side is
yeah.
like can be so alluring it takes over. It's almost like a kink frenzy when you first get into it too, just wanting to do it all the time.
A little bit. I would classify it almost as a frenzy. And that's why I say it's important to manage. It's absolutely fine to have fun. It's absolutely good and okay to enjoy what you enjoy. But just as a reminder, please make sure you are taking care of all of the needs in your life. You can't use play to escape from what needs to be done.
No, even when it feels and sounds like the most appealing thing ever, you are correct.
Yeah.
You said that you started off as a handler, right? Can you give some advice on what makes a good handler and what maybe puppies should look out for, or any two people trying to find their right puppy or handler? What makes a good match? What makes a good handler?
Great question. As a handler, the first thing to know is there's no one right way to be a handler. I know some handlers who play the very like doting old lady with a poodle kind of handler. I know other people who play the owner of a military working dog kind of handler. But the one thing I would say is be authentic because puppy play, as taxing it is as it is for the puppy, can also be taxing for a handler. You have to think if you're working with a dog, like a real dog, it can they like they're very hands-on creatures, right? You do have
Yes.
to engage with them. The same is true with puppy play. You want to engage with your partner. You want to engage with who you're playing with. So, however you're engaging, I find it's best to be authentic. Now, if you're a puppy looking for a handler, keep that in mind. Keep in mind your style. Again, I'm someone who really likes to be trained. I love to when I step with my right foot, or when they step with their right foot, I have to move with my right paw and so on and so forth. So someone who is a bit more strict and more inclined for that type of play is great. Some people are show dogs. They want to be made all pretty and wear all this gear and be posed and be carted around and do tricks. Look for someone who also wants to do that. Just as there's not just one kind of top for impact or sensory deprivation or electroplay. Handlers come in all shapes and sizes. And as a handler, find your shape and size. Also, as a handler, it is not bad to have some of your own gear. I have plenty of my own collars. I think I have 4 or 5. They're all spread all around here, but I also love wearing someone else's collar, right? That gives me a much different feeling of, oh, this is their thing on my neck. This is special. It's also good to have a leash. And if you want to get a really like personalized leather leash with like a rose gold chain and your name engraved on it, do that. Have something that's really authentically you and that you can like, ooh, this is my leash that's going on you. So it's never a bad idea to have some gear. Also toys and stuff. One thing I will say, a lot of puppy toys go in the mouth. So if you're going to get toys, get sanitizable ones. Is actually a company that makes human safe silicone dog bones. You can look for those. They're not too pricey, $25-$30 a bone, which for body safe silicone is pretty good.
Yeah, no, that is
Good.
really good. I
But
would never have thought of toys, by the way. I mean, treats blew my mind, and like I do know, like toys, of course that makes sense. Do you
yeah,
play fetch too?
I sometimes. That
Okay.
one's that one's really tiring. I don't do a lot of fetch.
I mean, all of it does sound tiring. It sounds like an investment in physical being because you have to be moving around, but also, yeah, like an actual financial investment. Everything you've described, it's not just a power exchange because that cannot be all mental. Like there is gear in this as well. But question on that, do you ever do scenes where you're not in any gear and neither is your handler and it's just
Yeah. First year and a half I was doing puppy play, I had absolutely zero gear. Granted, I didn't like having mirrors around because that felt a little weird. But yeah, no, you can do puppy play without any gear. And to me, actually, it can be some of the most authentic connection when you can be in that vulnerable space and have someone look at you not wearing any gear and still see you as a puppy and still see you in that light. That can actually be super connecting, because for me, it's very authentic when someone can see me be like, oh, puppy, even if I'm
Yeah.
not like, it's very easy to say puppy when I'm wearing my hood and my collar and like everything. And it's like, oh, puppy, duh,
Yes.
but for someone to see and know me as just me as Locrian and see puppy, that's super special. And playing in that element, I do have a handler right now. We've played without gear, and it's a very intimate experience, at least for me, to have someone see you as a puppy, see you in that light without all the gear. It's so a gear is absolutely not necessary, and in my opinion, can actually make for some amazing and cool scenes. So if you've never tried playing without gear, I encourage it. It's actually quite fun.
Yeah. I mean, well, we all love to be seen, I think, for
Yes.
who we are. And it does sound the intimacy, I can tell it's there. Okay. I know you gave advice for newbies, right? But for someone who wants to discover their local community of puppies, right? What advice do you have for them? Where can they go to find their community?
Great question. So finding puppies specifically can sometimes take a little bit more legwork. I will say a lot of places that I know that do pup play aren't as visible on FET as everywhere else. What I would recommend is start off in your local kink community. That just like the general thing, and ask people, hey, are there any puppies? Are there any puppy groups? That's a good way to find out what's going on. And I recommend that for any subgroup. Are you interested in impact? Ask, is there an impact group that meets? Is there like if you're interested in learning about being a dominant, is there a dominant support group? Is there a sub support group? Is there a switch support group? So that's one good way. The second way is if you live somewhere that has a leather bar, go to the leather bar. Like I said, puppies are very connected to the leather community. If you will probably either find puppies there or find someone who knows where the puppies are.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the leather bar that I frequent the most is where the pup mosh is held. So you might get lucky and be like, hey, I'm like looking for like puppy events. And like, oh, we hold a mosh every third Saturday of the month. Ta-da. Here you go. But
And you're saying mosh?
yes. So a mosh is a puppy social/play event. And when I say play, I don't necessarily mean like whips and chains and all that fun stuff. It's much more like puppy on puppy, social, friendly, toss a ball into a circle of puppies and see what happens kind of a thing. Moshes, in my opinion, are super fun. Though I keep talking about the one in that's closest to me. I haven't actually gone to that one, but I've gone to others in like LA and stuff like that. They're just a time to number one, meet people. Number two, you get to pup out a little bit. You get to play with other puppies. This is a huge thing that I was talking about, that like puppy on puppy play at moshes, totally a thing, because there's just like a huge mat and they're puppies. And so you go and you just get to hang out and like pup out with other puppies. And usually, and there are people who attend the munch not to play, just to be social. That's again another great way to meet other people. Ask them if they're okay with you asking them some questions about who they are as a puppy and like kind of how they figured out where they were. But yeah, munches are fun. Munches are great.
Okay, good to know. So it sounds kind of like a munch, but there's a little bit more play at it. Puppies.
I wouldn't call it the same as a munch. I would definitely say it's more of it is more solidly a play event than anything else, but there is a big social element
Um,
to it. I would say there's a social element to anything puppies do because puppies are just we're social creatures.
oh, indeed.
We're very
Yeah.
fun. But I wouldn't go expecting like munch vibes. It's more than that. So
Play is going to happen.
yeah, you're gonna see people roaming around. And I will say, when I say play, I can't remember having gone to a mosh that was like super sexual. So for people who are hearing play and thinking, oh, something sex related, not necessarily. A lot of it is like social puppy play activities. So people will bring toys to like, a rope for two puppies to grab an end of and pull a ball to play fetch with. It's not a giant orgy. So please don't go expecting a giant orgy. You will be really disappointed.
No, that's really good advice. It's funny because I guess because I do what I do, I never expect for things like this. I forget that people might expect to go up and it to be a big orgy or some sort of almost like swinger situation.
Yeah.
But that is a really good reminder. I have a question that I can't even say anyone else asked me. This is just coming up as you talk about it. You know how we always, maybe not everyone knows this, but in Victorian times, it used to be pretty popular for groups of people to get together and sort of pretending to be puppies. Have you heard that before?
Are we talking kind of like the history of animal role play kind of a thing in general?
It's more in general has been discussed as this funny thing that people did in Victorian times, as opposed to the history of, I guess, animal role play. Right. And I haven't
Mhm.
looked into it enough, but I'm wondering, is there any connection to it? Is that the origin that we have for it? Or were they just playing because there wasn't a lot going on in Victorian England?
So that would kind of fall under kind of the history of animal role play, which is something I've kind of looked into a little bit. It has not been uncommon throughout periods of time for people to engage in animal role play. I would say there's not a direct correlation between that and what we have today. However, very similar, right? People pretending to be puppies versus people pretending to be puppies. So the mechanics are the same, but again, at least in the US and kind of for the puppy play that we define today, that really again came out of the leather community and those relationships, as well as various other things. But kind of the origins of being a puppy, being that, at least for what we see right now, are a little bit more connected to the leather community than they would be to, I don't say extracurricular, but like outside of that animal role play. Because I mean, we can trace animal role play back to like the Egyptian times, people doing animal role play, not necessarily in a sexy sense. Sometimes it was ceremonial, sometimes it was as part of entertainment or art. Puppy play right now is a really cool mix of fashion, artistry, erotic behavior, kind of combines a little bit of everything. But yeah, so similar. I mean, I'm actually not too familiar specifically with the Victorian example, but I do know of other examples that are again similar to the Victorian one.
Well, evidently, neither am I because I wasn't even 100% sure. But what you just described is an actual rich history of animal role play because I did also tangentially know about the Egyptians. So it like there is a history there. It might just not be as erotic as what you're describing today. But thanks for that. I have another question that has just popped into my head as you went through this. Obviously, we've been talking about puppy play. I do not expect you to be an expert in all animal role play, but do you think there's much overlap in the people who enjoy puppy play as those who enjoy pony play?
Well, I also do pony play, so
Okay, so I didn't even know that. Okay.
yeah, I don't advertise being a pony very much. Quite honestly, I get to do it like once every other year, and so it's not, it's just something I enjoy. I wouldn't consider myself a pony, but there are a lot of differences specifically with pony play. It's funny that you bring up pony play because I've learned that pony players tend to be like, we're not like the puppies, we're not like the kittens. Our play is different. So we're specifically talking about pony play that looks wildly different. For me,
Yeah.
that's usually done outdoors. I'm either pulling a cart or you're doing trotting or you're doing something like that. But pony play in general, at least for how I play, requires a much larger and usually outdoor space. I feel like pony play also isn't necessarily as social. There are gatherings where people go to do pony play, and there's obviously some social things. But whereas I think like, think like a mosh where puppies are social creatures, and that's how a lot of puppies can act in community, there's not as much of that for pony players specifically. There are still pony conventions, or, you could have a team of ponies pulling a cart or something, but there are definitely some differences.
And do you know many other puppies who also will sometimes dabble as ponies?
I honestly don't know if I knew that. I do have a lot of puppy friends, and I think a couple of them also do some pony play, but there's not necessarily like if you're one, you're going to be the other. There's no
Yes,
like guarantee of that.
that makes sense. Yeah. I didn't think there would be, but I was wondering if there was overlap because there's still a lot of protocol in both types of play. Although pony play seems very high protocol from what I've seen of it.
It depends on what you're looking at. It can be very low protocol. So like you could just have like a farm horse that you're working with who's pulling the plow, and it could be very casual. Or you could be doing that dressage, very formal high protocol
Mm.
thing. And notably, I remember it's in the TV show Bones, and that's actually where I learned about pony play. And actually where a little bit of my interest came from in that specific type of play. It is very much the dressage, high protocol, very formal thing. But again, that it doesn't have to be like that. And honestly, most people don't always play like that. Unless I'm in a specific mood, doing something super high protocol like that is not actually what I gravitate towards.
Yeah, that makes sense. And sorry for pulling us away so far away from puppy play. I didn't even know you had ever done pony play. So I am glad I asked. You mentioned it being in Bones. Is there any other mainstream movie or TV show that includes either puppy or pony play that the puppy community really recognizes as standing out?
Will and Grace. That was the first time that puppy play was featured in mainstream media. I forget the season, I forget the episode, but it's kind of a notable moment was Will and Grace had some puppy play.
Oh, amazing.
Honestly, if you look online, you'll
Yeah.
find some things. This kind of role play in popular media is a little bit more rare, I want to say, but there are still some really good examples. So
Awesome. And speaking of looking online and looking for things, do you have any recommendations of books that people could read about puppy play?
yeah, absolutely. So one book that it looks like it's in development, but I still think there's some great resources on it is a book called Canis Major. And you can find that as well as some amazing resources on puppy play at puppyplay.info. The title of the thing is Nerdy Doggo. I love it. Honestly, when I was first learning, that's where I went to kind of read like everything, and I read everything. There is also a book called Puppy Play. This is for sale at Mr. S Leather, but you can probably find it elsewhere. Puppy Play by Tosa Alfainu. I apologize if that was incorrect, but the author's first name is Tosa, Tosa, and it's just Puppy Play. And that is another resource. I've flipped through it. I think it's really cool, and I think it does go into a little bit of the history, goes into puppy headspace. It can cover some of the gear, but those are just a couple of recommendations that I've had and personally interacted with. But there are other things out there. There are blogs, there are websites, all sorts of things.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for going through all of those. Pup, I am so glad you decided to come on today. Thank you so much. I've learned a ton. Appreciate you sharing all of your valuable knowledge that you've gained over the last few years. So, for all of the listeners, if you do want to find Pup Locrian on Instagram, you can find them at pup_Locrian.
So, for the people of the interwebs, I did recently do kind of a rebrand. Someone decided that they didn't like me being a puppy on the internet, so they were going to out me. So, unfortunately, that happened. But my profiles are up and kind of restarted. So, yes, my username at Instagram is pup_Locrian. Please request to follow. I just briefly look at profiles to make sure it's not someone with nefarious intent, and then you'll be on there. My Instagram is mostly for class announcements. So if you're interested in any of the education that I do, I teach about puppy play, but one of the main things that I talk about is diversity and equity within the kink and leather scenes and the swinger scene and the polyamorous scene, actually, too, a little bit. But if that's something you're interested in, that's what a lot of my classes focus on. You can also follow my TikTok, which was recently, I did change the name on that.
You've basically flipped it because on TikTok, you're at Locrian
Underscore
_pup.
pup. Yes. So I just flipped the username there. That is also a private account. Again, I just want to manage who's seeing that. But my TikTok is more for general education. I will eventually start putting videos out. Right now it's pretty sparse. I privated some of my old content, but it is there and you are welcome to follow. I think that's about it in terms of social media. If you need to get in contact with me, whether it be for a question or things, you are welcome to email me at puplocrian@gmail.com. I try to get back to people within 3 business days. So not including weekends. Some people have learned business days is Monday through Friday. So if you email me on Saturday, you'll get a response by Wednesday.
Yeah, that's a good boundary to have in place. And Pup, you have your own podcast as well, right?
I do. Yes, I do it with my best friend, Pup Juniper or Lord Allen. We talk some about puppy play. Yes, it's called Pup's Podcast. But we talk about everything. We just posted an episode last week, I believe, about taboo kinks. So that's where we're going into like rainbow play, race play, blackmail, all sorts of things that are just, well, people tend to be like, whoa, you wow. But mostly we talk about like what draws people to them, like their standing in the community, things like that. But we also, if you don't want to listen to that one, I completely understand. That is a rather advanced one. We also have things on like boot blacking. We did several episodes about Black history in leather for February, and we had some amazing people like Sir Guy, Triple X Hex, HEXXX, some great people who cover the history of people of color, specifically Black people in the leather community. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you're interested in learning more about kink, puppy play, we have that out.
Awesome. And I would just then reiterate, don't just listen to the most recent episode, check out the back catalog as well.
Yes, check out the back catalog. I also apologize because I will admit I do the editing and sometimes I'm not very good at it. But it's a learning process and I've gotten better than I was the first episode.
Pup was super helpful. As soon as they found out I had a podcast, they reached out immediately and said, hey, need any help? Need any advice? And I thought that was so kind. And that's one of the things I love about even our online kinky community is we are willing to all lend a hand and like jump in and make sure no one's reinventing the wheel if they don't have to. So I think
Yeah.
I think you're doing great and I have no notes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Pup, thank you so much again for coming on. I really appreciated having you, and I really hope we can do this again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it interesting. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Email info@thekinkconsultant.com. Until next time, keep on kinking on.